439 men went under the mountain at Senghenydd on the 14th of October, 1913. One more died, bringing them out. The Eerie Embers archive opens 3 Welsh records tonight: Senghenydd Colliery, Craig-y-Nos Castle, and Denbigh Asylum. I keep the flame, and the flame keeps the record. It burns brighter when you listen. First, the castle that stopped being a stage. Then the asylum built to end one cruelty that came to enact another. And last, the mountain that did not give everyone back. The castle called Craig-y-Nos sits in the Brecon Beacons, and for 4 decades it was the private stage of the most famous voice in the world. Adelina Patti sang the great opera houses of Europe for most of her career, celebrated as the finest soprano of her generation, before she ever set foot in Wales. When she came here, she came to retreat from that world, not to leave her stage behind entirely. She bought the estate in 1878 for £3,500. She built her own theatre into it, modelled on La Scala in Milan, seating close to 200 guests, and opened it in July of 1891. She also had the castle wired for electric light, powered by its own gas engine on the estate. It was the first private home in Wales to have electricity, years before most towns did. She performed there for royalty, and for no one at all, whichever she preferred that night. She died at Craig-y-Nos in 1919. 2 years later, in March 1921, the castle and its grounds were sold for £11,000 to the Welsh National Memorial Trust, an organisation with one purpose: to fight tuberculosis in a country where it was killing more people than almost anywhere else in Britain. At her widower's request, the hospital took her name. The Adelina Patti Hospital admitted its first patients in August 1922. Children, young women, from a region where the disease had nowhere left to hide. An opera palace, wired for electric light before the rest of the country had it. Built for one voice, given over to the sick. That is where this record stops. What happened inside those wards in the decades after is not this archive's to tell tonight. Some records stay sealed for the living. What the archive can say is this: visitors and staff still report a change in the building's temper, room to room. A cold in the old theatre that has nothing to do with the season. Voices, sometimes, where the orchestra used to sit, under bulbs that were the first of their kind in the country. Tradition only, nothing the record confirms. But the record itself, the plain fact of what that building became, needs no ghost story added to it. If Craig-y-Nos changed by circumstance, the next place changed on purpose, and it did not go the way anyone intended. In 1842, a group of landowners, clergy and businessmen met in Denbigh with a single grievance. Welsh-speaking patients committed as pauper lunatics were being sent across the border into English asylums, where staff could not understand a word they said. One superintendent of the era called it, in his own words, the most refined of modern cruelties. The committee raised money by public subscription. A local landowner gave 20 acres of his own estate, and in October 1848, the North Wales Asylum opened its doors. 200 beds, a Jacobean clock tower, and 9 attendants for the entire building. 9 attendants, 5 for the men's side, 4 for the women's. And for more than a decade after opening, no one on duty overnight at all. The asylum's own inspectors, the lunacy commissioners, wrote it down themselves. Patients died in the dark and were not found until morning. Falls, seizures. At least one death recorded as a patient taking his own life, unwitnessed because there was no one in the building paid to watch. The asylum grew anyway and kept growing. A chapel for 200 patients, built in 1862. Wings added in 1865 for 150 more. By 1881, capacity had swelled past 500, with a dining hall built to seat 400 at once. The commissioners wrote down what the growth actually looked like on the wards. Beds pushed into corridors, patients sleeping on the floor, rooms so crowded a man could not leave his own bed without climbing over the next. Medicine in these decades meant chloral hydrate for sedation, little else. The asylum's own accounts show it spent more each year on wine and spirits than it did on drugs. In 1871, Turkish baths were installed, believed at the time to treat melancholia and rheumatism, and the same tuberculosis that would one day fill a castle across the county. By 1908, the asylum had grown into something closer to a self-sufficient village than a hospital. Close to 1,000 patients and staff. Its own farm, its own workshops, its own economy. Walled off from the town it was built to serve. The institution that existed to relieve one cruelty had, on its own paperwork, built another. No ghost is required here. The record already indicts itself. The last record does not ask you to believe in anything at all. Universal Colliery had already killed once. On the 24th of May, 1901, an explosion tore through the same pit and killed 81 of the 82 men working underground that morning. Only one man came up alive. The colliery was rebuilt, restaffed, and put back to work. 12 years later, on the morning of the 14th of October 1913, a spark from the underground signaling gear met a pocket of fire-damp methane gas trapped in the seam. What followed was not one explosion, but a chain of them. Coal dust igniting behind the first blast, tearing through tunnels where 439 men and boys were working an ordinary morning shift. One more man, a rescuer, was killed by a roof fall while searching for survivors. 440 in total did not come home. It remains the worst mining disaster in the history of the United Kingdom. The same pit had already proven it could happen. Nobody stopped it from happening again. The official inquiry that followed found what the men's families already knew. Fault after fault, laid directly at the door of the colliery's owners and managers. And for 440 lives, the fines handed down came to £24 in total. Contemporary newspapers did the arithmetic themselves. About 6 pence a man. The colliery reopened before the end of the same month, and the men who were left went back down. Locals still speak of sounds near the old pit site on quiet nights. Tradition, nothing more, and the archive does not need it. The record does not either. A primary school now stands on the site of the old colliery, and a memorial garden a short walk from it, kept by the people of the valley who have not let the record close. 440 names carved in stone, still read one at a time by anyone who stops to look. 3 Welsh records, sealed here tonight. A castle that changed hands and never explained why the cold stayed behind, in rooms that were lit before almost anywhere else in the country. An asylum whose own paperwork became its condemnation. And a mountain that took 440 men and gave back a fine of £24. The archive does not ask you to believe in what walks the corridors of Craig-y-Nos or what waits unlit in Denbigh's halls. It asks only that you remember what the record already proved. Sealed.